able to know everybody, but now, we can't even talk to lenders, we're having intermediaries. So I'm sure I've heard all your names, but probably don't have a clue who a lot of you are. So by your face, but kind of just to tell you a little bit, I started appraising back in the 80s, and we didn't have to be licensed back then. We were just grandfathered in, and I had a stint at Iowa State for 4 years with a major in housing. So found it fortunate to kind of land in a profession that I studied at Iowa State. So I was real happy with that. Why I'm here today, I have to call out Sarah on this because she and I had a conversation this fall on south of Grand property I was appraising for her, and she got my infamous call. Hey, Sarah, I'm having a little trouble here. I'm coming in okay, but, I just kind of need to hear a little bit more to help support my value of it. So we started talking about it, and we got talking about price per square foot. And I always cringe when I hear that, and we'll get into that. But it got talking to her, maybe she could come talk to us. I said, I'd love to. I'd love to talk.
Actually, I was like, oh, so that's why none of my houses ever sell, because I wildly overprice them.
And there's a place for price per square foot, but anyway, that was kind of how it all started, and that's why I'm here. So with that, now just I'm going to breeze through stuff because you guys are on the front line. I'm not on the front line, so you're going to know a lot of this stuff already. So just a show of hands, if you've been doing it 10 years or more. Yeah. Have you ever had another show of hands run in with an appraisal that came in a little less than what you thought and had to kind of work through it? Okay. We're going to breeze through this stuff because I really do want to only talk about a half an hour and let the rest of the time be things you do have questions about, how we reason through things. So with that, we're going to get going, and we're going to get the big elephant out of the room that everybody asks, what trends am I seeing? And I will answer that how probably every other appraiser answers that, and I'll say it depends on where you're at and what kind of property you have. One thing I will share that tends to be a trend we typically see, and especially now when the winter's cold, once it starts warming up and staying warm. Last year it started around February. This year, who knows, but I start taking a look at those offer dates. So a closing date may happen in April, May, but I'm going to look back at that offer date because if it was during a time when things were starting to charge up, and you're going to see it first usually in the townhome and condo market, when you guys are pushing it for your sellers, and I don't blame you for that, I'd be doing the same thing. But we have to be able to read that and how that equates to fair market value on the date that we're there. So just kind of an FYI on that. If they're an appraiser out there and you're struggling with their value, bring that up to them. That, hey, this is a market that's charging up. Maybe it's a time where I go back to a year ago at that time and take a look at what it was doing back then to make it equate and work better. I work with about 10 clients in town. So every client is a little bit different as far as what they require, how they're scrutinizing my work. Some are a little more picky, some not so much. So with that, a lot of times I just make the worst case scenario be the way I write all my reports. So I have everything covered. So at least 2 pendings and or listings are going into my report if I have them. So in that changing market, we're doing our due diligence to try as hard as we can. And I would much rather call a realtor on the front side like I did with Sarah than have to wait for a reconsideration of value to come through and then go back and spend time on a report I did 3 weeks ago. And I hate going back to old reports. I hate it. I don't like spending my time there, so I will take 5 minutes to call the agent and just say, hey, what am I missing? That's really what the conversation is. And I think the lenders appreciate that because then they're not the bearer of bad news to the borrower and yourselves. I've already done that for them. So can't talk to lenders, but I think a lot of them would tell you they're probably happy we did that.
So it's fair to say, because I reached out to you and said, hey, if you have any questions, let me know. I'm happy to share how I got my questions. And as a rule of thumb, we do that for every appraiser.
You know, I don't think it's a conflict. There's this HVCC rules out there. There's nothing more regulated. Every profession probably says this, but it is published that no other regulated profession is quite like the appraisers. And I've seen 30 years of it, of cycles. We get one set of regs, they stay in place, but we add on. We're just piling on. So I don't think it's a conflict of interest when a realtor calls me up.
Okay.
I don't believe so. I'm not going to turn around and turn anybody in. I think that's what some people are being told, that you'll get turned in because you're a bias, and now, you know, can you really perform that appraisal? So if you're professional and you're strong backbone, I was interviewed, my first interview appraiser job, he asked straight up, how's your backbone? Okay. Well, now I know why you have to have a strong backbone if you're in the appraiser world. You guys experience the same thing too. So getting that out of the way, the trends, let's talk quick about hot markets. How I measure a hot market would be where there's a lot of for sale by owners. And I know that may not be what you guys want to hear. And I'm going to, as I go through the talk here quick, I'm going to take you to different neighborhoods and talk about them real quick. So a hot market to me this last couple of years was West Des Moines, south of Vine, between 35th and 19th. We had a lot of for sale by owners there. We had a lot of for sale by owners on northwest side of Des Moines, on either side of Lower Beaver. That's another little hot market that happens. The condo market is kind of fun to work with. You don't have a lot of differences in amenities, so you can kind of measure things at that point. When I'm doing an appraisal in October, September, I'm not even looking at sales that occurred in March or earlier because it just wasn't the market. That's not a market I want to measure because the sales are already too old. So, you know, you just use kind of different signs of what's going on, days on market. South of Grand, we had a lot of comps with no pictures, which made us calling you guys more. That again was a hot market. They were going so fast that they weren't, why even put pictures out there? We appreciate you did put what information you did, though. The more information we have, the better we can do our job. And then here's another little tip on hot markets and how you can adjust. So I'm going to use your backyard of Windsor Heights here. Say you have that ranch home where the elderly lady has lived there since it's been built. Hasn't done a thing to it, but it's got wonderful, pristine woodwork. It's got birch cabinets that look like they were put in yesterday. And she's got that green shag carpet, but man, underneath is that wonderful hardwood floor. A lot of times in Windsor Heights, we can't show much of a condition adjustment compared to a home that maybe has had oak kitchen done, you know, 20 years ago, or maybe white cabinets were put in the 90s. You know, it's had some updating, and, you know, just people want those homes, and they don't come along very often. So you have to be real careful where you're making your condition adjustments, and I'll talk more about that. So one other thing before we delve into the handouts, lot prices. And we're all reading the same builder magazines, and I just recently read an article where the lot prices are becoming more of a challenge for the cost point of entry homes. And I think that is something worth watching because we report when a lot land value becomes 33% or more, Fannie Mae wants to know how that relates to the value and marketability of the property. So you're getting into, you can't find a lot less than 80,000 in the western suburbs. So, you know, you have to really watch where you're at. It's not unusual for me to say, and I'm going to share some honest stuff with you that I do. If it's a refi and it's an acreage and they're in an acreage that, man, it's kind of a hopping place for that acreage, I will say to the owner when I'm out there on the refi, you're going to get a copy of my report and you're going to see a land value. You're not going to see a cost approach, but we have to still provide them a land value. I'm going to stay conservative on your land value because if I get too high, it's going to cause a whole bunch of underwriting problems, and we're just trying to get you to refi your home. So I will tell them ahead of time, because if those ratios become too out of whack, we have to go into more explanation, maybe more comps, takes time, drags your closing dates down, everything. So just something to kind of be aware of. So with that, I'm not going to spend any time on this handout at all, but if you guys have this handout, I'm going to refer to it. So about 10 years ago, Fannie Mae came out with what's called UAD, Uniform Appraisal Data Set. What that basically means is appraisers in Iowa are using the same codes as people in Wyoming. Fannie Mae has basically taken all of our information, they're putting it in a computer format that their computers can understand. If we send an appraisal out, we're sending it out MISLO. We're also sending out a PDF. I do credit unions as an example, they still want the PDF. If it's an appraisal management company, they just want the MISMO language. If you click in on that MISMO language, it's all computer jargon. I couldn't even read it. So Fannie Mae is taking our data and they're coming up with what's called appraiser waivers. It doesn't happen a lot here, but it does in your rural areas. Polk County is not on the appraiser waiver list. And for a refi, I recently read this in one of our trade magazines. Fannie Mae is making the call of whether they can do an AVM on them. And they are doing it on more the refi world, but they're still requiring 80% of their appraisals to be products to be done by appraisers. So that's kind of what's happening. There's a question always, oh, are appraisers going out? They're dinosaurs. I'm 56. I hope I can still be doing this for, 10 more years. But at the same time, we're giving them the data. And our data has a short shelf life of 4 months best. So somebody's got to still give them the data, so we're still going to be around. That's my personal opinion on that. Okay. What I wanted to bring your attention to on this is you'll see condition ratings. So there's a condition rating of, pay attention more to C3, C4, C5, and C6. C1 is basically a new construction home not ever occupied. C2 is one that can compete but has been occupied. Could be an extensively remodeled home. So on a C3, I'm spending most of my time calling your properties a C3. That's my average. That's what I call an average. C4 is probably that Windsor Heights Colby Ranch that hasn't been updated for a while. The C5, C6, now you're in a territory where you want to be careful. If it's a C5 and I'm saying that this is why, it could turn around and become a requirement of the report. Even though it's not, it's a conventional loan and most of the work I do is conventional. I do FHA, but I don't do any VA. C6 is probably in a territory where it could not be a property they can market through Fannie Mae and be purchased. So the takeaway here is if you're going to list a property, make sure it can meet at least the C4 classification. It's all subjective. Every appraiser is going to be different. You're still at the mercy of our opinion on that. But just make sure you're all at a C4 or above, or it could cause you problems and heartache with finding a handyman in the last 11th hour of closing. That's all I'm going to say on that handout. So knowing that, we're going to now turn to the sales comparison approach grid. And what I'm going to do with you for 20 minutes, I hope, I'm going to go fast. I'm going to pay attention to the categories that we have to cover. And this is why price per square foot does not work. It's because there's too many different categories we are forced to consider by Fannie Mae. So square footage would be a big one. But I'm just going to go through and I'm going to tell you how I reason. Our job is to be providing an opinion of value that is reasonable and fair. It's not an estimate, that's a liability word. Ours is an opinion of value that's reasonable and fair. So I'm going to tell you how I reasonably and fair analyze every category, and some we don't analyze. So I'm going to go through that. I'm going to go through it really quick because you guys are in this market too and you get it. Dirty little secret. And I'll tell you when I'm sharing something that's just my personal opinion by saying dirty little secret and something you need to take away. From condition on up, it's really tough. If you're going to have an appraisal report that comes in low, I would look there first and scrutinize it. If a friend brought me an appraisal report, that's where I would go. Because those are tough categories from condition on up to draw data. Now, one thing, why I bring up UAD, 10 years ago, Fannie Mae also laid down the hammer to appraisers and said, any adjustment you make, you will support. Wasn't any more of this grab off an adjustment list. That's why I don't like adjustment lists. They don't work. So you have to support what's reasonable and fair. May not have to be in the report, but it has to be at least in your work file if we're ever questioned or ever sued. So because of all the changes that happened in the last 10 years, I kind of looked a little differently at how I get my adjustments and what I'm going to support. So I'm going to share with you really quick how I go through each category. So I'm going to start with location. Probably the biggest, location you hear all the time. So I'm going to take you to different neighborhoods and give you scenarios. So I'm going to appraise on either Hickman, Douglas, University, or 63rd Street. Location is a big deal for those thoroughfares. I'm going to use only comps if I have them that are on those streets. I'm not going in the neighborhood. I'm not going a block away. I'm going to stay with what's busy on that street because location is a tough one to adjust for and a tough one to support. So if I have to make an adjustment for location, I'm questioning whether that's really the comp I want to use and if it's really fair because location is very inconsistent. And a lot of it depends what's also around in your neighborhood. Are you near commercial? You know, all that comes into play. So location, I try not to make the adjustment and I throw the comp out.
What was your 4 streets again?
Pardon?
The 4 streets.
If I'm on University, Hickman, Douglas, or 63rd Street.
Thank you.
I usually will go to 63rd Street if I don't have enough on the others. And if it's in Des Moines, I'll go everywhere. Because again, location for those properties is too big of a factor for marketability that I should consider anything different before I even go to other categories. Site and view. This is where that lot craziness comes back in. So here's how I address that. And I'm going to use Ankeny as an example. Ankeny in a neighborhood in the last 5 years has been developed. It initially had lots of different builders. It wasn't a one bulk land purchase. You've got detention ponds everywhere anymore, and you've got PUD fees, and if I have time, I'll address that too, of things we're seeing. But you've got a lot of good data from the last 5 years on lot sales. So say I've got a home in Ankeny that backs to one of these detention ponds, and I can show through history that if they were within a year, a comp, land comp was sold for $80,000 back into a detention pond. A typical interior lot went for $65,000 at that same time period. That said to me there was a $15,000 difference at that time. It equates into a pretty good site view adjustment. You can do the same with tree lines. Adele, I've been able to do that with some of that newer construction stuff. I can show that as well. So that's kind of how I do my site view difference. Because again, you have to have perfect data to just say, this is the adjustment, and this is what I'm going to keep using over and over again. Each assignment's different, and each time the adjustments could be different. Design, so now I'm going to take you over by Luther Hospital, and I'm going to take you into that neighborhood south of Euclid and west of 14th Street. So I'm over there with a 1.5-story home, 3-bedroom, 1 bath. And I'm going to compare that to any 2-story, 3-bedroom, 1 bath, and any bungalow with 3-bedroom, 1 bath. To me, the square footage and the number of bathrooms you have in that neighborhood is more important to me than the design and appeal of the property. And I can say that the functional utility is similar, square footage is similar, so I don't care about design and appeal. It's very rare I'm making a design and appeal adjustment because it's usually going to get captured in something else.
Is that fair to say for any small neighborhood?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. And
You just mean because it's not fair to compare that neighborhood to Beaverdale.
yeah, I wouldn't go there anyway. Yeah, I wouldn't go
You're
there.
saying you would rather have.
If
it
I'm in that
little
neighborhood,
niche.
I have found that a 2-story, 1.5 and a bungalow don't sell any different as long as you got the 3 bedrooms and 1,200 square feet. There's no difference. It doesn't make a difference if you're climbing upstairs to that finished attic that happens to be a 3rd bedroom. Maybe it doesn't have a closet, and also Fannie Mae or FHA took out that you would need a closet to be called a bedroom. They took that out. So, and this is what we're asked by homeowners too, especially the refi world, where you can talk a little more freely and they're there. People will ask, I've got a room down in the basement, you count that as a bedroom. And I'll get into this with basement finish, so I'm jumping ahead. I go by finished square footage for basement finish. I don't go by number of rooms. Some appraisers will do that different. So I tell them, I said, for me as an appraiser, you're lucky you got me because I'm going to go by your square footage. I don't care if it has an egress window or a closet in it. I'm just going by square footage because that's where my data tells me to go. So, but I tell them, now if you're going to market your home and you got a realtor looking at your home, they're not going to call that a bedroom. They're going to want to see probably the closet, and they're going to want to see the window. So, dirty little secret, everybody still puts their teenagers in these rooms because that's where they're sleeping. So, to me, I go by square footage of basement finish, but that kind of jumped ahead a little bit. Number of bedrooms. So, okay, now I'm going to take you into West Des Moines, and we're going to talk about number of bedrooms. We're going to take a 1960s two-story, and it's got 1,600 square feet, 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, because 2.5 baths wasn't as popular back then yet. And we've got a 4-bedroom West Des Moines two-story. Around the corner, 4 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, 1,600 square feet. Is there a difference by having that extra 4th bedroom? In my opinion, there is not. The square footage is the same. So if we think this through, we've got a 3-bedroom, you're still sharing the bathroom with the kids. 4-bedroom, 1.5 bath, you're still sharing the bathroom with the kids, but probably more kids because you have 4 bedrooms. So where are your buyers wanting to land? You know better, you hear their stories, you know better than actually I do where their thinking goes. But that's why I don't measure between number of bedrooms and number of bedrooms in that market if there's only 1.5 bathrooms. I just can't show that. I capture it in square footage. So a lot of times in my report, I'll say, no adjustment for difference in number of bathrooms. It has been considered in square footage difference. Because if you think that through, if you've got more bedrooms, you got more square footage above grade. So are you double dipping when you do adjust for both? So I've just always done it that way. It flies through underwriting, no problems on that. Now let's take that same bathroom scenario and let's go up to Northwest Des Moines, the Beaverdale, Lower Beaver area. That has 1950s, 1960s homes. You may have 1 bathroom, you may have a half bathroom. I can't always show additional value for that half bathroom. It's off the master. You're still sharing a shower with the kids. You're just probably not sharing the midnight stroll to the bathroom that most of us go through. So, you know, you have to really think. I don't force adjustments. If they're not there, I'm not forcing it because, again, my big deal is I have to support whatever I'm going to adjust for. And can I support it? Here's where appraisers have leniency. So let me talk about square footage because this is where it comes into play. When I go through an assignment and I'm picking my comps, I've been out to the property. I don't do any comp search till I've been to the property. I've learned through the years you can go search for your comps ahead of time, but after you've been there, it's pretty gross inside, and I just wasted all this time. So once I get back from looking at the property, I will go to the MLS and I will search for my comps. I'm going to maybe pull 15 comps, and I'm a paper person, so I print them all off. And then I'm going to set them all in front of me. I'm going to go through them again. I'm going to try and narrow that down to maybe 9. And then I'm going to take the grid on my computer, and I'm going to start inputting address, sales date, and I'm going to put in square footage, number of rooms, and basement finish, and I'm going to stop there. I'm going to do that to all 9, whether I'm using them or not. And then I'm going to look at that, and I'm going to say, okay, now I got in front of me. Here's the main babies to look at, because I wouldn't have pulled it if location was off and site view was off. So now I can start working with my numbers. And I'll be honest, square footage is a play as you go. So square footage, if I've been in a neighborhood and $25 a square foot was where I was at last time, I'll try that. I'll say, okay, I'm at $25 a square foot. My main goal in the end is to tighten the range. If I'm going to stick with those 9 comps in the report, I want that range to be tight. So how am I going to tighten the range? And there's no hard and fast rule for square footage. It's just what's tightening your range, if that makes sense. So that's how I treat square footage. And then I just start, again, playing with that a little bit. I will say Fannie Mae requires bracketing. So if anything is 15% higher or lower square footage than what I have to explain why I'm using it. So we want to try and stay within 15%. Do you? Probably 50% of my reports are always within 15% of the square footage. They're hardly ever. So I'm just explaining more when it gets to be a demo. Okay. Basement finish. The first line on basement finish or basement is for the basement size and basement finish square footage, and then we mark if it's a walkout, a walk up, or an interior. So that's what that first line of basement will be. And then the second line will be the number of rooms. That's where you say family room, bedroom, bath, rec room, den, whatever you have. This is what messes up homeowners the most. we put our name and our phone number on every report, and they get a copy of the report before closing, but maybe they don't look at the report until after everything's all done. We'll get a call later and say, you got my square footage wrong. I'm like, okay, you're reading the report, tell me where you're looking, what are you seeing? Well, yeah, I have 2,500 square feet of finish. And I said, yes, you do. You have 15 on the main level and you have 1,000 in the basement. So you have 2,500. I don't disagree. I said, Fannie Mae forces us to analyze those separately. Could be the same number adjustment we're using, but we are forced to analyze that separately. So that's, sometimes we get those calls about 1 year. I usually get regarding that. So I talked briefly that I like to do basement finish adjustments based on square footage. Some appraisers will choose to do number of rooms. One thing I will say, I love, love, love when realtors will put in their listings under the comments, the square footage of the basement finish is per assessor, seller states it is such and such. Because we all know Polk County isn't going in and checking all those basement finishes. Dallas County will even estimate. So if you ever notice on Dallas County, they'll have verbiage that came straight from the MLS. They're using your data. So the pictures are golden for me. Every time I'm using a comp, I'm going through every frame picture big on my computer because I want to see the difference. And I can visually see, okay, 200's on the Polk County assessor site. You guys have put 200 for liability. I get that. But man, there's 800 here. You know, so I may call you and just verify that because I want to use what's actually there. I'm not going by what the assessor says. If I don't know, I'll go by the assessor, I'll make my adjustment, but then I'll say appears from pictures and conversations with realtor, there is more. This comp is weighted now less. So that's how we're dealing with the basement finish. So it becomes kind of a little tricky on that. Walkouts, the only comment I'll make on walkouts is sometimes it's hard to find an adjustment for that anymore. And here's why. It's harder and harder for these developments to get walkouts. So you may not have walkouts in all your new construction markets like we did 5, 6, 7 years ago. The other thing is, and we hear this again from refi people who we end up talking to a bunch, homeowner will maybe say, I didn't want to walk out because my children are down there, they feel more secure. And I've even heard when they're a teenager, they don't want them sneaking out of the house. So, you know, as long as there's some good daylight windows, I may not adjust even though you have a slider that went out. Or you've got, I think, Genesis that does that. I saw it recently, the split back. I'm on your Central Iowa Realtor Facebook page too, so I see the chatter. Yeah, switchback was it? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wouldn't know what that was either. And that's where that stairway is on the back side that's in between the two levels. So is it a walkout? Is it not a walkout? You know, I don't know. I'm not going to adjust for it. I'm just going to let the numbers tell me and pick a number in my reconciliation that says better. Heating and functional utility, I hardly ever adjust there. The only times you might adjust there is maybe we're off of Merle Hay Road up by Merle Hay Mall. You've got some branches up there that have a basement, don't have a basement. Most of the time they have a basement. But if I've got the one with no basement, I'm going to have to use some comps. I might ding them a little bit for not having a basement because our numbers are showing they sell less. So what's that number? I'm going to put that under functional utility. Another one might be, you hear cost to cure, which is basically cost to replace. So say you have a home that needs a new roof. Nobody's going to fix that roof before close. So you have to put a cost to cure. You put a $5,000 adjustment in there because that's the cost it would take to replace the roof. You're making that across the board. A caution on across the board adjustments, it will almost always trigger an underwriter to ask you for more comments. So if you're in a situation where you've got something unique to your home and that appraiser is thinking there's no way I can measure this, I'm just going to make it across the board, no. Your other option is, remember you got that wide range, you got 9 comps, you could have a range of say 200,000 to 240. You got to pick a number in there. That's where you're reconciling all that. Let me, as the appraiser, take the upper end because you have that really fun, cool, unique feature, and I'll use geothermal as an example here in a minute. So you want me doing that. You don't want me to see across the board adjustment because it won't fly through underwriting. Those days are gone. So that can't happen anymore. Geothermal under heating and cooling. Can be disagreeable. I'm just going to speak on my opinion on this. I cannot find value for geothermal. And if we have builders in here, I'm sorry. Because on a construction bid that you see the cost, that geothermal is costing a pretty penny for those people to put in. But I just cannot show it. And a lot of times why I can't show it, that geothermal is going to show up in an acreage kind of property or a property with a really large lot. Well, if it has a really large lot, it's probably got a lot of other bells and whistles. I can't isolate it. So how do you deal with that? I deal with it by, again, that range. Let me consider it in the range, and I'll say in my report, I cannot support through the market geothermal brings any additional value. However, it enhances marketability. And because it enhances marketability, I'm taking the upper end of the range. Versus me making a $5,000 adjustment, or letting me take the upper end that gives you 15. Let me do the one that gives you 15. So if you see where I'm going with that, adjustments aren't always what you want to see. It's the reconciliation, and the reconciliation is at the end of the report. So that's why you need to read the whole report. So sometimes we'll get a call from somebody disgruntled, and they'll say, you know, they'll look at that number on the bottom, it's on your form, and they'll say, you know, I don't agree with this. And I'll answer professionally, you know, tell me what you're not happy about. And they'll tell me, and I said, well, did you read the report, all the report? Because it's all explained in the addendum. Well, no. So I'll say, you know, when you read the report, I'm more than welcome to, you're happy to talk about my report with you then. So it's important to read the whole addendum. There's a lot of good stuff in that part. It's not just the good. Let's see, energy efficiency. I hardly ever adjust anything there. The only thing I'll say on energy efficiency, it'll be interesting to see where solar goes, because we are seeing a little bit more solar. It's not the ugly stuff on top of a roof anymore. When I have seen solar, it's been the refi market, because if you think about it, who's going to invest that kind of money and then turn around and sell their home? So, and I have a property, when I have a property that has solar, I'll just kind of take out another sheet of paper. I'm a clipboard person, I'm not a technology person. I'll just say, tell me about your solar. What was the cost? What do you have going with Mid-American or Alliant? You know, are you on the grid? Are you not on the grid? So I did one that wasn't on the grid once, or was trying to not be on the grid. So there's lots of different things that can happen there. One just had it for an outbuilding. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm trying to educate myself on it more, and I think there will be more coming as it regards solar.
If you're not on the grid, does that give it better value?
The particular one I did that was trying to say net zero had a space heater in the home. And also, so, you know, I was there alone. The realtor met me there, and then they left, and I locked up. So that was the scenario we're walking into it. And I happened to just kind of see laying on the table was an invoice from a heating and cooling company that said, we can't work on your unit. This is not something we typically work with. So I'm like, okay, we got space heaters. They had things under the door from the atrium door to the deck that was keeping the draft from coming in. So I'm just like, this is so bogus, you know, is what I'm thinking the whole time. This is just bogus. I spent a lot of time on that report, and we made it work. But I'm like, if this is where we're going, I'm not dealing with this stuff. I'll decline the properties. But it's different. That was a long time ago. Now it's, you're hearing that conversation of, oh, in the summertime, I can save $200 a month. You know, or, and these are big houses usually too, again, acreages sometimes, or, you know, they know they're not going to recoup their costs. They're smart people that are putting these in. They're not out there in la la land. So it's just a very interesting conversation that I'm just trying to learn more about. So they do somehow connect with Mid-American. I'm still not really sure how that all works, but they get credits back or something, and I don't know when they really get paid back and all that. But there's still, and there's not much equipment in the houses. You know, back in the old days, there used to be all this big old stuff to match the big old stuff on the roof. But it's not like that either. You would hardly tell inside the home that they have solar. So it's kind of interesting where it's all going. I've not done a wind turbine yet or anything. anything like that that has a little one hanging out of the house. Garages. Again, going to take you back into that northwest neighborhood on either side of Lower Beaver. You've got a neighborhood where there's 1950s, 1960s houses. Women didn't work back then, so one-car garage was more than enough for that family, and the lots weren't big enough to put a two-car garage. You have some, though, in that neighborhood that have a two-car garage. So your chances of maybe having to adjust for that are kind of high. When I do my initial search, I'll keep the garages out. I want to just find the comps because there's plenty of comps up there. You don't need to be comparing your one-car garage to a two-car garage. It's just one more area where they're going to question you. So I'll do my search that way in that neighborhood. Going up to Ankeny, difference between a two-car and a three-car garage where both are prevalent could be a pretty big deal. I've shown as much as $15,000 to $20,000 for an extra stall garage. There, one year, not that long ago, it seemed like we were getting some more comps that did the two-car garage attached, and then they ended up putting a two-car detached in the back corner of the lot, great driveway to it. Okay, how many are you going to have like that? Probably none. So how do you decipher that out? I ended up analyzing like a three-car garage. You're not conveniently close to the house, you're out in the elements, so I did it that way and didn't give that fourth stall any value, but I didn't adjust it when I compared to a three-car. But I did when I adjusted to a two-car. So there's just different ways of analyzing, again, depending where you're at. Deck patio porch. My personal opinion is if you're making a $500 adjustment on anything, I'm like, really? I just really don't think the data is supporting that kind of minimal adjustments anymore. So when it comes to a deck patio or pool or deck patio or porch, what I do is as long as it has at least one, I'm not adjusting. You could have the most wonderful enclosed porch on the back, not heated, but I don't care. I've got a deck. It's a nice deck. You can sit out on it. You can have, you know, your drinks on weekend evening. How many different things do you really need back there? So I don't adjust. It's just the market isn't that good to tell us what we're adjusting for there. Now, if it's a heated enclosed porch, then you start deciding, do you include it in square footage? Because it's heated, it's year round. That's how you address those really nice. Or those patio, I don't know who the company was, it always made them, all the glass, you know. Those, a lot of times, were going into square footage because that's just how you guys were looking at it. You could measure that pretty tightly, but that is what was going on. Below porch and patio deck, I will put fireplace. Again, a really minimal amenity. So that's when I'm going to go to Marshall and Swift Cost Handbook. And in Marshall and Swift Cost Handbook, for an average quality home, a fireplace will cost $2,000 to $3,950. For a good quality home, it's $2,825 to $5,850. And that Marshall and Swift can change on us. Every quarter we get an update. So that's where I'm going to lean for my adjustment for fireplace if I can show that tightens my range. Again, if it's tightening my range, I'm going to try and find some kind of an adjustment for it. If it doesn't tighten my range, then we'll let it go. It's a fireplace. It's a couple $1,000. I'm not going to try and get in the weeds with that. And sometimes you could have you have two fireplaces. Maybe one is that wood burner. I had one recently, that 1970s wood burner, and I'm like, oh, it's just really ugly. You know, it takes up all this room. You know, what kind of value are you giving that? Because that's not what people want anymore. So you kind of have to look at it that way too. And then the last line that I'll throw in there, if I'm in an acreage, is an outbuilding. And this is a lot of times where a realtor will call and they'll say, I have an outbuilding. What kind of value do you give that? Because it can be a huge thing. So I'll start the conversation on the phone and I'll say, okay, where are you at? I'm in the Southeast Polk School District. I'm like, okay, whereabouts in the Southeast Polk School District? Because I'm looking to see if they're near Highway 65 or not, or they're near where you can get on at Vandalia. How close are we to some thoroughfares? And then they'll tell me, and then the next question is, okay, how many acres do you have? And if it's 1 acre, I'm thinking to myself, okay, they're not going to want to hear what I have to say. If they say 9 acres, I'm like, okay, this thing's got some value to it. So then if it's a 9 acre, I'll say, okay, would you have any fencing? Because, you know, in Southeast Polk School District out there, everybody's got a horse. If they've got an acreage, they're going to try and have a horse. So you look at that. Just because it has horse stalls in it may not matter because people can take horse stalls with them. A lot of times they don't, or at least that's my experience. You guys might have something different on that. So I'll ask the amenities, the size of the lot, the fencing, the location. That's going to drive me on where I go for an outbuilding. If somebody is on Southeast 64th Street with a 40 by 60 outbuilding, it's got concrete floor but nothing else inside it, you just have a glorified garage. Maybe they have a 3-car garage already. So really, is it worth as much as people think they are? So that's how I go through the outbuildings. If I'm up in Story County, because I cover Story County as well, you're going to get into more of your typical acreage properties. Because I'll be honest, I sometimes even struggle what to call rural in Polk County. Because if you notice, everything's almost paved roads. You can't find any gravel road hardly at all in Polk County, a little bit here and there. So a lot of times, I'm still marking suburb. I got to think lenders like that because I think it does something to the rates if you call it rural or you call it suburban. So again, if I can push it, I'm going to push it and say Southeast Polk. You know, even as far as Reynolds Elementary School, I'm calling that suburban. Even though it's primarily agriculture, I'm marking agriculture 80%, single family use 10, and commercial 5, you know, whatever the numbers end up being, it goes through. So that's all I'll say on that. So with Story County. So Story County, you're going to get into your more typical, I grew up on a farm, so your typical barn, chicken coop, and a corn crib that really isn't much anymore except storage for somebody. And maybe you'll get a couple 4-H projects that are going to get done out of this really old barn. I look at that as the lump of everything. What can I do on this property with all these buildings? You may not be able to do much. Chickens are becoming a bigger thing. So some people are converting these sheds back into chicken coops. But then I'll look at that and I'll try and pick my comps accordingly because that's where somebody's going to argue. They're going to argue you on the outbuilding. So I want to make sure my comps are covering any argument for an outbuilding, if I'm giving it value or I'm not giving it value. So I'm trying to project ahead of time what somebody's going to argue with me on and try and cover that in the report. Where price per square foot can come in handy. So I used to live in Ankeny, now I live downtown. I live in a downtown loft. So you would think downtown, price per square foot is a big deal, and it is. You have prices or adjustments and an adjustment value per square foot that's higher than anything you probably would do on a single family home. However, the other thing to consider, and this is where price per square foot does not work downtown, is you have garages and you don't have garages, and parking is a big deal downtown. So there's been transfers without condominiums included, just the garages, that will show $50,000 for an indoor garage and $25,000 to $35,000 for just a parking space. You go into Mulberry Lofts where there is no parking, and they go into Nationwide and have to rent. They're barely getting over $140 for even just 600 square feet. So that's where the price per square foot where you'd think would work. Like in my building, everybody says, oh, $211 a square foot. That's a good starting point, but let's see where the numbers are really telling us we need to be on that. So I just did a brownstone on Grand, 201 Grand, and that was tricky because it's a townhome. And you just don't have townhomes unless you go across the river to the other Hubble development. And that's all new construction, mostly custom built. However, there now is a resale, and there is a pending model. So that's helping that little market too, to see where we need to be. But those are hard.
How do you define condo townhome? Is it by the legal or is it by the?
Yep. So condominium, you look in the documents that you guys are providing, and it'll say horizontal regime.
Mm-hmm.
If it says horizontal regime, that's a condo. And otherwise, in your documents, I don't know what they're called, declarations and covenants, or what's the normal the legal title, that's where I'm looking. So if nobody knows, although you guys are so good about putting all those documents out there anymore, but when the day when we didn't have those documents, I'd be at a condo and I'd have the owner looking through their file to look for that paperwork because that was going to say what it was. Now, I do remember, and this has been a long time ago, so it could have changed. I was out in cobblestone townhomes, And even though it's a townhome, they wanted it treated as a condo because of insurance. So we had to go back, after we did the report, we had to go back and put it on condo form, which created more work. But that was odd, though. That never happens usually.
And we had a period of time where builders were using condo horizontal development in townhome properties because it was so much easier to create it. So they just did it that way and then built townhomes on it, and it created quite a mess for
Triton?
5-7 year period. It was,
Triton did that. I remember that.
yeah.
And then they almost went to all townhomes after that.
Oh,
I was involved in some of those that were condo, townhome. Altoona was a condo, but
Right.
the one in Ankeny was a townhome.
right.
Yeah, it was all just really weird.
Okay, I have 2 questions. First of all, my friend's a realtor in Denver, and she meets her appraisers at 100% of the appointments when they happen. If I have one that I'm a little bit worried about, I recommend that the seller be there. Do you recommend that the seller be there, or would you like realtors to be there, or would you prefer nobody?
I'd like the seller.
So
That's
that's
my
good.
personal-
That's good for us
that's
to
my
recommend that
personal
the seller be
opinion.
there to meet the appraiser.
And that's happening a little bit more just because a lot of people are working out of their home. And I have questions. The first thing I'll go in and I'll ask is to the owner is, I'm here a short time. I'm going to be taking a floor plan of your home. I'm going to be taking pictures, and I'm not a good one to tell them I'm taking pictures. Sometimes it does kind of freak out some people. So please just let them know the appraiser may not tell you, but they're going to take pictures inside your home. So anyway, I'll say, I'm here a short time. Just tell me, what you've done since you've been in your home. I'll see on the tax assessor, they've been there since 2010. I still want to know. I really want to know if they've been there 3 years or less, because I have to report what the price was in that 3-year period, and then I like to follow it up by, and here's everything they've done to the home since that time. Realtors are very good anymore about putting a lot of the updates in there. I'm looking at seller disclosures more than I ever have before in the last 3 years or so, because some of that will show up on seller disclosure forms too. The seller disclosure and the new DMAR purchase agreement is really great now with homeowners associations. Because of all these detention ponds, everybody's now paying $100 a year. And a lot of times these buyers don't know they're paying that. And to be honest, some realtors don't know about it either. So if we're going to get a call back on something to correct in our report, almost all the time it's because I missed that there was an association fee on that. And it shows up in title. Now, I even had one in the Easter Lake development that was 15, 20 years old. It was kind of out there on some of those Easter Lake parks where it was. That one had an old one. I never remembered a PUD out there, ever. And I did a lot of work out there. It showed up in an old title because I said, there's no PUD. I said, I even called the owner again, embarrassingly, and said, do you pay homeowners dues? No, we never have. It showed up on title. They had one. We had to still make the comment, none exists, none's being collected. So any place where we could kind of improve would be check out your PUDs. If you've got a detention pond, you're likely paying a fee. May not be collected, but it's going to still show up on the title that you have an association established for that. What we're also finding now that it's been enough time is that the owners have that choice of whether they let it lapse or not, or this is my understanding, it could be different. So some of these people are saying, we're not dealing with this anymore. We're not paying $100 because we don't back to that detention pond. So you're getting now some of these PUDs that were PUDs 5 years ago are going to start going away. So now we got a whole big cluster going. So the DMAR purchase agreement now is telling people to write, check the mark, I believe, that that's an association or not. And then we have to go as far as saying is the developer still in control. So that's kind of the pain in the butt information we have to kind of search for. One thing I'll share, a hot little neighborhood to rehab in. What my personal opinion is that neighborhood north of the interstate, south of University, west of 48th Street, all the way to 31st Street in Des Moines. That pocket area, Roosevelt High School area, is, I think, hot. I can't believe what some of these prices are for 1,400 square feet. And they're even higher for properties that are larger and nicely done. And the rehabbers today are not your rehabbers from 20 years ago. They know what they're doing. I was doing a lot of Raleigh cap ones for a while, and I did one by Drake. And this was interesting. The city was not going to sell them the home to rehab unless they were willing to put the open front porch back on like it was when it was originally built. So I really think I applaud the city for what they're trying to do to these neighborhoods, even though it's been controversial. I do appreciate where they're trying to head with some of the stuff they're trying to do. So the 3 takeaways, and then I'll open up for questions. I want you guys just to kind of know that pre-printed adjustment sheets are kind of, you're playing with fire. You can use them, but I think you're playing with fire. Price per square foot is not the only way to look and analyze properties, and don't force the data. If the data's not there, you've got other alternatives. You can look at that reconciliation and you can see what number you're going to pick in that reconciliation, because for private individuals, somebody wants to sell their home. We get a lot of calls on this right now, so I kind of see it's generating some heat already in the market. They have a choice. Do you want me to pick a range? Do you want me to pick a number? We want you to pick a number. We don't want a range. We want you to pick a number. So picking the number is still our job, but that's what I have. So
if you're not doing price per square foot, like I know that you kind of just ran through where to make adjustments, but is it safe, like when we go to, like, for us to pull comps, to say like, okay, we have a 1,300 square foot home, so let's start with looking between 1,200 to 1,400 square foot homes of similar style, and go from there.
Yep. Our appraisal standards frown on the fact when we do a parameter search. So they frown that we're even putting in price when we search. So using your scenario of 1,200 square feet, that 1,200 square feet commonly found in West Des Moines. So when I go search for 1,200 square foot ranch in West Des Moines, I'm going to outline my map. Now I know I'm at the mercy of whoever inputted that and where they're putting that dot. I get that, but that's not the only time I'm going to search that way, or not the only way I'm going to search. So I'm going to put in, okay, give me all the 1,000 to 1,400 square foot, because I want to search just one time on certain things. So I'll put a wide parameter in, and I'll take the time to sift through. And then I'll say, okay, I got a 2-car garage, give me all the 2-car garages, and that's it. And I'll just see where the MLS, what they give me for comps. And then I'll go through and narrow those down as to basement finish and all that good stuff after that. Yep, I won't even put in a price to look for. Yep.
I have a question about split lawyers and different counties. The reason I ask is I just go home in Warren County. The assessor, for whatever reason, would consider the lower level dining room, then we consider the mid level. So I go on market as 1,100 square feet, even though it's 1,900 square feet. So how does that affect?
Yeah, and I'll just personally share, I did an FHA of an or a DeSoto one that was like years ago. They ate me apart when I tried to do that. FHA didn't want it either. So they want above grade square footage. You analyze it. You have no bedrooms on the main level. You have everything down below. I still had to analyze it as 2 rooms, 0 bedrooms, and half bath.
This one had 3 bedrooms up and then just a dining room.
Yeah, they're big on that above grade, below grade thing.
So it's just 1,100 square foot regardless whether or not it's 1,900.
Depends on your lender and how you analyze it. If you've got comps that are similar, you can play it off that way, that this is the market, these are my comparables. I don't have comparables. I mean, even in that Urbandale older neighborhood by the big park, north of Hickman, there's some wacky split foyers over there that they chose to put all the bedrooms downstairs. There's some on Park Avenue that are like that. They did some split foyers that way. I don't get the reasoning on that, but that's what they chose to do. And it's a nightmare for we appraisers because it's hard to find those kind of comps. You can't search the MLS real easy on there.
So a 2-part question. So the first part, and I apologize if you said this already, but what is the distance that you search for when you're looking for comps?
Okay. So I'm just a single business owner. I came through the ranks of, I'm going to date myself, United Federal Savings Bank when it was around. I was there a couple of years. And then I went to Iowa Residential Appraisal Group, Allen Hummel's group for 10 years. And then I went to Wells Valuation, Wells Fargo / for 15 years. And then about 4 years ago, I went on my own. So I want to be my own boss. So I make a business decision that if the client I'm going to work for is going to make me stay within 4 months of any sales date, and they're going to make me stay within a mile, I'm not doing your work, because that's not a Fannie Mae guideline. A Fannie Mae guideline allows you to go over a mile. It allows you to go past 12 months as long as you explain. I just probably wouldn't put that one that sold a year and a half ago as comp 1, 2, or 3. It's going to screw with all the underwriters, and they're going to call you on it. So make it that 4th and 5th comparable. But I don't agree with that that's an investor decision. That's not a Fannie Mae decision that somebody is making.
So the reason I asked that question is because I was always taught, like, stay within a half-mile radius for your comps. And, you know, I've been creative in unique situations before and looked at it multiple different ways. But specifically, last week I ran into a situation where by attached on the southwest side of Ankeny, we had 4 good comparables because, you know, they're all in that neighborhood. And then somebody else priced a different buy attached in that same neighborhood using comps from Northeast Spring. Would you do that?
If the numbers are showing me it's competitive, I would.
But are they showing you it's competitive when the Southwest buy attached is $30,000?
Southwest in Ankeny? Yeah, you're still in Ankeny?
Yep.
Yeah.
So the Southwest side is $30,000 less. Northeast is $30,000.
Oh, is that what your numbers are showing you?
Yeah.
Then I'm not so sure I would, because you're making a $30,000 adjustment. If the numbers are showing you they're competitive, then and it sounds like you would have enough
So if you
sales.
have enough comparables, you wouldn't probably expand that wide of a
No,
range.
there wouldn't be any reason to. You're just opening yourself up to liability, questioning everybody to come down on you when you do one.
Well, good, I'm glad I was right.
I wrote that.
So if you have a super unique property, like I have one who they have geothermal, they have a batting cage in their basement with like 20-foot ceilings, very, very unique stuff with it. And they asked me if they're thinking about selling, what would I list it for? I don't freaking know. What the heck do you recommend? Because I've done this before on a unique property. The sellers had an appraisal done before I listed. Do you recommend that, or do you recommend here's some not totally comps, but they're in the same area, they're luxury ones, here's the range, list at this, get an offer, and hope that the appraisal comes in?
Try to be safe when you could, and here's why it may not be a good idea to have it appraised first, because I work with 10 clients. I'm on a list of 10 people. I don't do anything else. I'm not on their list. I'm not on their rotation list. So you could hire me to do that, and then that buyer that comes along goes and gets financing, Wells Fargo, because I don't do their work anymore. So I'm out. It was my opinion how to address that, Jim.
But having that appraisal at what you appraised it at, I guess my question is your job to try to come up with the value that we've sold it at?
However, we get that question a lot, and we get that from refinance people. Oh, you're just going to come in. You're always in at the number that we sold it at. We get that all the time. Yeah. And here's my answer to that. I tell them, well, first of all, 90% of the time I'm not at that, and I don't tell them whether I'm high or low, because I don't know. When I'm out at the home, I have no idea what that value is of that house. So what I tell them is, if everybody's educated and everybody's doing their job, they should be at the same number, because we're all looking at the same data. You as a seller, from your realtor what's going on. You're living in your neighborhood. You know what things are selling for. That buyer has looked at 20 properties. They have an idea of what everything has been selling for. So if everybody's doing their job, we're looking at the same MLS, Polk County records, Dallas County records, Zillow. I will say I check Zillow, BizboHomes.com. If I'm coming in low on a property and I've called you, just know that I have covered every source I can think of before I'm calling you. Because I don't want you to tell me I missed a comp. I don't like hearing that. So I would say I have done a gym before in a basement that was just a glorified basement on an appraisal. The people decided to say, I don't agree with that. The lender got a second appraisal done. But I ended up doing the final inspection, which said to me, okay, they're using my report for the final. I don't know, after I'm done, I don't know anything about anything anymore. So that said to me, okay, I called it a glorified basement, which is all it was. And, it didn't make value because of the cost on it. But sometimes that stuff is just too unique that, it's just not going to bring.
And with unique properties like that, how far, because sometimes your comps, you have to go out further.
Manufactured homes, I won't even put in.
Well, not manufactured, unique properties like
Yep,
she was
so
talking
I would
about.
do the same thing. I would look, because if you got a gym, you probably got a pretty big property. I would search for square footage based on what you're saying, probably got an acreage or a very large lot. But an example would be on a manufactured home, I don't even search for location. I just say, give me all the manufactured, because there's not that many. It may be the same thing. You put in gym. I don't find that whole put a word in and search. It doesn't always work for me. I don't know if it's something I'm doing or what. And it doesn't capture it unless you put it in there. So that would be helpful as a extra comment. But yeah, those are tough, and you're probably going to. Yep. Just shout it out. Yep.
Question, to go back to when you were talking about Sarah's question, when you go to other sources, do you always go to other sources, or if you have what you need, do you stick to the MLS?
Nope, I'll always go to other sources because I've had it happen too much in my past, especially if I'm coming in low. But even I'll do a quick search just to see. Zillow captures, your guys' stuff. It captures for sale by owners. It doesn't capture next generation, which I know is a subject here. But that's a quick search for me. And they pull their stuff so fast. As soon as they get a pending, they're pulling it. So when I'm at a property and I see a next generation listing, I'll pull the listing because I know sooner or later I may want to use it and they're going to pull their stuff soon. So I those are my searches I make. If I'm in Story County, I'm searching the Story County assessor because they have an easy search engine. Dallas does. I don't do Jasper. I do a little bit of Warren.
One more question. How do you treat in-ground pools?
I wanted to ask that too.
Usually I will give it no value because the old Fannie Mae way is you got a pool and you're given a pool value. You have to have at least 2 comps with a pool. So that's what you run into. However, I will say with all the development to the west, there are becoming more pools. And I'm seeing it on the Facebook, Central Iowa too, who has a pool. So I'm like, oh, okay, because that's helpful. Your Facebook site is real helpful for us to know what people are looking for. And if their first thing is, I'm looking for a pool,
So
then
would you go back to a year then if you could find one with a pool?
I go back 2 years.
Oh, you go back 2 years. Okay.
Yep. And then you have to decide when you're making the time adjustment. Again, Fannie Mae has no guideline for you on that. That's an investor that's telling you if you have to stay within so many parameters or miles, time, everything. If I had to appraise based on the last 4 months alone or even 6 months, you're forcing me to use some weaker winter sales. So I tell people right now that are refinancing, I said, you're picking a good time to refinance because I'm forcing myself to use all those strong spring sales there in the last 6 months. The trick will become in March and April, we're going to have those weaker winter sales. And I'm not saying lower because I don't see trends of up and down a lot. I see pretty steady eddy. But I will maybe blow past again an offer that had October, December in it because we're seeing longer marketing times right now. Well, if you look, it started in October and they're not moving on the list price. If you guys are in a charged up market, you guys are usually adjusting your list price after a couple of weeks. So it's a soft market, I'll call it that, because the days on market and you guys aren't declining your list prices real drastically. You're just trying to get through winter, is how I read it. So we look at it. I look at everything like that stuff. It's not it takes time to do an appraisal anymore. I wouldn't encourage children to get into it. Just pay like it used to.
So you said for like square footage, you like stay within 15%. What if it is land, like it's more of an acreage? Would you lump like 2 to 10 acres together and then anything over? Or
I'm not sure I understand on
like
that.
how much value do you give it
The land.
if it's more than
Yep.
5 acres.
So let's go back to Southeast Polk School District. I'll look at lot sales, because I have to put a land value on everything, regardless if I'm doing a cost approach or not. And I don't do a cost approach. We're not required to do a cost approach on anything that's 2 years or older. So with that in mind, in Southeast Polk School District, I cannot typically find much difference between 2 and 5 acres. When I get into 2 and 9 acres, I can go back to land sales in the last 2-3 years, because that's how far back I'll go for land sales. And I can typically start seeing, okay, we're around 50-60 for 1 acre, but man, we're all the way up to 85 now when we get up to 9 acres. So then that's kind of telling me where my comps need to stay, unless I need to start adjusting. And then if I'm a 2-acre parcel and I'm using the 9 acre, because I'm trying to capture that really great outbuilding, I may be making a slight adjustment on that. But it's not plain and simple, every acre gets you $10,000. It's not the way the market works anymore.
So I'm running a search, because I do a lot in Southeast Polk. So when I'm searching, like say I have a property with 3 acres, when I'm running comps, I usually look anywhere between like 2 and 7.
Yep.
To try to keep
I go
it.
1 and 10.
Okay.
Because I want everything in that first initial search. I don't want to keep going back and trying to play with that all. Because it can take you a full day if you try and play with all that. So I'll just try and capture them all big time. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're dealing with something like tree routing, like to tag on her questions like that, some of the properties have tree, and then there's others that are tree, but they're like a ravine property or an outdoor. How do you?
So how I look at that is I say, okay, what's the usable land area? So maybe it's a 5-acre parcel, but the last 2 acres is all steep creek and trees. Like, okay, great, it's got a tree view, but really it's not because of the land, it's the view. Because you can still only have that little 2 acres to work with to put a swing set or.
But you don't break that up by saying that that's worth less than something that's
No,
tree, but
I don't
you
get in the weeds with that. Not typically. I'll explain it why I'm not making an adjustment, but it's just every category we've talked about gets 1 paragraph in my reports. So I'm typically writing a 2-page addendum to the sales comparison approach. I don't know how appraisers are getting by filling in the form, and that's it. I don't see how they're not overflowing with the way things are required anymore.
This is just a question about your verbiage, but I've heard you've referenced a couple times that you would use Zillow as your comparable data, and I just wonder, do you really use Zillow as a comparable data, or do you use RPR, or does it matter?
When we are required to put in there what our data sources are. It'll be assessor/MLS interior pictures. That's it. If I use Zillow, I'm not telling people I use Zillow because unless that's all I have as an assessor and a Zillow as a private sale. And then you can go ahead and then I put Zillow on there.
Do you find a preference between RPR and Zillow?
I don't use RPR.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fair. I just
Yeah. So I'm not familiar with that at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I just stick mostly with the MLS and the assessor, and if I can't find comparables or through the Polk County assessor site, for example, in those hot markets, you weren't finding it on the MLS, I'd print it off from the Polk County assessor. Okay, let's go out there, and I don't really even go to Zillow. I'll just type in the address and Zillow pops up, and then I have pictures and I can verify, although you need to be careful what date those pictures were. Could have been from an old MLS and stuff too.
Would you give any value to a tax abatement? There's a house that I rehabbed and filed for a 10-year tax abatement, so taxes will be under $2,000 versus them being really $8 to $10 grand.
When I first started, the South Side was starting tax abatement, and we were always kind of curious, okay, what's going to happen? Are we going to be able to measure anything that we never were able to measure anything? So I personally do not. When I do a new construction home, Wells Fargo used to have an old rule that we had to use 2 resales on every new construction, which I never agreed with because the resale market is so different than the new construction market. I don't use custom builds because the market value definition of Fannie Mae says exposed to the market. When you're using a custom build, you're just comparing cost. So it has to be a spec home, new construction, or it has to be towards the end of construction. So a lot of times, because of that scenario, you're going to capture similar sales. So Norwalk, for example, when it was first kind of charging up and getting a lot, you had to kind of force yourself to use some of those resales down there because you really didn't have a lot of new construction. So you do kind of look at it then, but it might be more of an age factor at that point than really tax abate.
I know I have someone that's interested, but that's a big deciding factor.
I can't measure it. However, some could maybe argue they could. But yeah.
I'm curious, how many reports are you returning? I mean, are you coming in undervalued? Is that happening a lot?
I would say maybe 3 a year.
Oh, okay.
Not really that many.
From you.
From me.
Good point. Good point.
And to be honest, when I call on those, and it wasn't so much with your sir because I knew I was going to be okay. I just knew.
But you're a good appraiser. There are appraisers, unfortunately, that are not using the same subjectivity as what you are. And that's what bugs me, is that it is so open to opinion. And I do not think that you should put an opinion on neighborhoods in the city of Des Moines, because that could be very desirable for somebody just because it's not desirable to that appraiser. I do not think that should be allowed.
And I don't do review work, and I never will do review work. I'll go flip burgers somewhere before I'll do review work, just because I don't want to see what other people are doing and getting away with that. I know the time that I put into my reports, and it's a lot. I'm like, and they're getting away with it because of maybe the client. I got great clients. Again, I pick and choose who I work with, and they're great. So I know what they're looking for. They know what they're looking for from me. If that's happening, that's a bummer for our profession, because I know people are saying, well, you're not going to use a short sale, are you? No, you don't use short sales. We were even hearing during the foreclosure period, well, people are using the foreclosure. Good luck with that. Unless you have a C6 and a C5, you're trying to appraise as is, you might go into that foreclosure market and say, there's a lower limit here. Or the short sales, you can pretty much show the discount they're getting on the short sales. So that's a bummer if that's happening.
I had an appraiser that came in low, and one of the things that she made a comment on, which caught me off guard, is like, well, I seen there you're getting you're giving away $2,000 of closing costs. Should that play in a factor?
That's even controversial among appraisers. So if you go to classes that we go to for CE, it has to be cash basis equivalency. However, a lot of us, I think, and I'm in the whole, appraiser world here for Des Moines, I think a lot of us aren't adjusting for closing costs because it's so much a part of the market now. And also what's not happening now, which used to happen, especially remember when you'd have $6,500 equity funding in addition to $3,000 of that, I'm like, I don't know how long that can last. But what's happening is prices are still going under list. They may be getting full list price with concessions, but they're still going under list, which says to me, the market is accepting this. When they list a property, they know their wiggle room they're willing to take. If it's going over $3,000 and $3,000 included in closing costs, I'll maybe call the realtor and say, just kind of tell me, was this did you have a lot of, I see 2 days on market, that kind of thing. I'll make a phone call to you guys real quick and just say, do you have a lot of competing offers? Because I want to put that in my report, because that's a comp I'm using to say, there are people fighting over this one. They're going to fight over my subject too. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. But overall, I don't think most appraisers are adjusting for concessions, but I wouldn't start getting into that donut hole or that rabbit hole of adjusting, because I think it's only $2,000, and you really got to sit back and think, how good are you? A condo, I could and have gone 2,000 under, but that's because they were trying to get the height as much as they could, and I just had nothing. I didn't have a pending, I didn't have anything in that development that was saying I needed to go that high quite that. Those will be tricky. Those will be tricky in March and April, May, when you guys start listing them, because you're going to want to do the best you can for your buyer. And I even did hear a story, this wasn't me, but somebody said, oh, just offer that. The appraiser will correct it, because they were in a competition. So they offered the highest price, and then the appraiser came back and had them correct it, and then they got their property because that was kind of a risk to take. They could have had one of those appraisers that appraises everything at, you know, too, but I heard that happen too. You know, it's me.
In terms of adjusting, like what values are you going by? If you said that it's using the, the adjustment sheets or like they require.
That's kind of how I go through it, and I go through kind of when I mentioned, I'm going to input my comps with the address, the date, the square footage, number of rooms, and basement finish. Those are the big things that you can adjust for normally all the time. And then I'm going to look and I'm going to see what tightens the range. Maybe I start out at $25 a square foot, but I'm going to end up at 10. Or maybe I'm going to end up. It seems like Hubble properties, a 2-story typical. I'm going to start at 65 because that just always seems to be where I lay for that kind of property. So I'm going to start where I think I need to start. I'll give also another example. I'm out in that Lutheran Hospital area again with a 600 square foot on Morton Road, post boards. I could be making $55 a square foot for that basement finish. I'm going to get you confused. Basement finish for a 600 square foot home is a big deal because they don't have much on that main level, but man, if they got 400 in the basement, I could definitely be making $50 a square foot on basement finish for that house. I'm going to try and keep my 600, 700 square foot comps, but the basement finish will change a little bit. So that's an unusual one I usually run into because that basement finish means a lot more when you have a smaller house, and it'll override my square footage adjustment on the main level may still be around 15, 20, right? And that doesn't usually happen. The basement finish adjustment usually isn't higher than the main level. It usually doesn't happen, but it can. Okay. Well, great. Well, I appreciate everything.
Thank you for coming. Don't forget when you pull in, if you didn't on your way in. Well, only if you want that. Thank you. You're so welcome.
Way to go.